We feel confident we're going to win, but that doesn't mean we're going to stop either. We're going to keep fighting for our borrowers and for our students and our K-12 students who are looking at college as an option.
Hey, GRIO fam, it's Gerren Gaynor, White House correspondent and managing editor of politics at theGrio, and I'm here with Secretary Miguel Cardona. Secretary, welcome to theGrio. Pleasure to have you.
Great to be with you, Gerren.
So the DOJ officially filed its brief with the Supreme Court with these lawsuits presented before the administration challenging the Biden-Harris administration student loan forgiveness program. Could you lay out the arguments the administration makes in this brief?
Sure. Yeah, look, again, yesterday was an example of how we're fighting for the 40 million people that we believe are eligible for debt relief, and we're not going to stop fighting for them. Yesterday, with DOJ, we submitted briefs that clearly articulate how we have the authority under the HEROES Act to do what we did. You know, I had the authority to provide waivers in the case of a national emergency. The pandemic was a national emergency, and I used that authority. That's what we sent over to SCOTUS yesterday. We feel very confident we're going to win. We feel confident that the 40 million people that are eligible for debt relief will get debt relief. You know, it's unfortunate, however, we have people that are fighting us on this. Republican elected officials are fighting us from providing help to the American people when we know right now after this pandemic, we can't leave them worse off than they were before. We're going to keep fighting.
I know you say you're confident, but is the administration prepared for a plan B in the event that the Supreme Court does not rule in your favor?
Well, Gerren, look, the HEROES Act was used to implement pauses in loans, right? In the last administration, we extended that. In this administration, using the HEROES Act authority. That's what we're using here. So we feel confident, and we should feel confident. But to your question, you know, what happens if not? We haven't, this isn't our first thing. You know, the president has been very laser focused on making sure higher education is more accessible to more Americans. So from day one, we've been working really hard, whether it's fixing public service loan forgiveness, improving income-driven repayment policies so that people don't have to put so much out of their pocket every month in loan payments, to making sure we're taking care of our veterans through the 90-10 rule. Like, we're working really hard to make higher education more accessible and more affordable. We're going to continue to do that. We feel confident we're going to win, but that doesn't mean we're going to stop either. We're going to keep fighting for our borrowers and for our students and our K-12 students who are looking at college as an option. We want to make sure that they have access as well.
That work is really important because the cost of education, as you mentioned, is so costly for so many, especially Black students and Black borrowers. I want to move on to a slightly different topic, HBCUs. The Biden-Harris administration has allocated record funding for HBCUs since taking office. In this new Congress, is there any confidence that the administration can work with Republicans in the 118th Congress to get more funding for HBCUs?
Right. Let me go back really quickly to the last point you made. Let me tell you, we feel confident that this is going to pass. And what we've put forward would mean 42% of Black borrowers will have their loans zeroed out. Talk about addressing the racial wealth gap. Okay, the president, when he went up to $20,000 for those who are eligible for Pell, we knew what we were doing is addressing the gaps that exist in wealth by race. So this is very intentional. This is why we're fighting so hard for this. And with regard to the HBCUs, you know, this president, from day one, again, president and vice president have been really focused on making sure we're lifting HBCUs up. You know, with the American Rescue Plan dollars, there was $6 billion for HBCUs. We're going to continue to partner with HBCUs. And it's more than just giving them money. It's about giving them a seat at the table to help us work with them to see what supports they need to lift up HBCUs. So we're hopeful that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle see it that way as well and work with us to try to lift up our HBCUs, because we know they punch above their weight. We know they do a lot for not only our students, Black students that are attending them, but for the entire country.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis recently sent a memo to state public universities asking them to provide a tally of funding for programs related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and critical race theory. I know your office has spoken about this issue of race and attacking the teaching of race in classrooms. Is there a concern that the governor of Florida could penalize or punish these universities for these type of programs?
Well, I don't want to speak specifically about what this governor is doing. What I can tell you is he and other governors have intervened in negative ways when it came to safely reopening our schools and making sure that the safety provisions that we know work keep children safe. With regard to attacks on universities doing their job, I think, unfortunately, it's a step backwards. We need to let our education leaders lead and our educators teach. And I think, it's an attempt to get a national name for himself. Right now, my focus is on making sure our universities have what they need to get students back into the classrooms, learning at high levels, and graduating without tremendous debt. That's what our focus is. And we want to work with all states, all governors to make sure that that's possible. But we don't want to support efforts to limit universities from doing what they do best.
And last question for you, Secretary. There's been a record number of discrimination cases filed with the DOE's Civil Rights Office. What is the department's assessment of this uptick, and what do you maybe think is the cause?
Well, going back to the previous question, right? We have a lot of state policies right now that are really infringing on, we believe are infringing on, potentially infringing on the civil rights of students. And you've seen the uptick, right? I think it was 17,000 in 1 year, which is more than any other year. I think that's a result of poor policy at the state level, limiting access to schools or targeting students, many of whom are already marginalized and pushed aside, targeting them through state policy. So we're not going to stand for that. Our Office for Civil Rights is going to make sure that the civil rights of all of our students across the country are protected. That includes our LGBTQ students. That includes our Native Americans. That includes students that are being marginalized or pushed aside. We're going to make sure that they have access to school, and we take that job very seriously. I also think the pandemic really, affected students with special needs and students with disabilities significantly. And what we're finding in some places is that the support that they need is not really being matched. So we're making sure that districts and states are doing using the American Rescue Plan dollars, $130 billion that the federal government provided, to make sure that every student is given the support that they need to succeed and thrive. The goal is not to recover from the pandemic, it's to thrive and go beyond it. And the Office for Civil Rights is there to protect our students, especially those that are being marginalized and attacked by state policies that are totally off the mark and not aligned with American values and what makes this country great. The Office for Civil Rights welcomes complaints, welcomes requests for investigations. We know it's really important that we use education to unite, to give students opportunities, to open doors for a future. And we're going to stand right by those students if we feel that policies are being passed to harm students or make them feel excluded from school.
Education definitely opens doors. So thank you so much for your time, Secretary Miguel Cardona.
Good to be with you. Take care.